Okay, so good morning, everybody, for those that they are in Europe and Africa. And today we have the European Journal of Neuroscience webinar, a virtual workshop on publishing that is organized by the Mediterranean Neuroscience Society. And European Journal of Neuroscience is the official journal of FENS and is from Wiley. And we have the honor to have as our speaker Professor Bernard Bayen, who is a section editor at the European Journal of Neuroscience. And Professor Bayen received his bachelor's degree with honors from the University Medal and the University Medal from the University of Sydney, and his PhD from the University of Cambridge in UK. And then he was elected as a research fellowship at Jesus College, Cambridge, and spent 3 years as a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Experimental Psychology at Cambridge University. He was appointed as an assistant professor at the University of California in Los Angeles and associate professor and then full professor in 2004. He was elected a fellow of the American Psychological Association in 2004, and in 2005 he was appointed director for research in the Brain Research Institute of UCLA. He has been awarded also with different fellowships and prizes, and in 2009 he was appointed a professional position at the University of Sydney, and in 2015 he was made a senior research fellow of the National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia, and subsequently an NIMH senior investigator in 2020. So since 2016 he moved his laboratory to the University of Sydney, and he was appointed a UNSW Scientific Distinguished Professor during that year. So he will talk to us today about the European Journal of Neuroscience, that he's a section editor. So I will changing the slides, so he will tell me when to go to the next slide.
Okay, so I hope you can all hear me too. Is it I'm coming through okay?
Yes.
So thank you very much, Christina, for the opportunity. I'd hoped to do this at the Mediterranean Neuroscience Society meeting, but there were some scheduling issues. So we thought this would be a good way of giving people exposure to what the European Journal of Neuroscience does and what its mission is. I'm, as you just heard, Bernard Belain. This is my email address. If you have any feedback or questions, contact me or contact Christina, who can also answer, I'm sure, many of them. Yeah, as Christina mentioned, I'm a section editor. I'm actually the section editor for behavioral neuroscience at the European Journal. So let's just move to the next slide, Christina. The next slide just describes an important feature of the European Journal, which is that it's the official journal of FENS, the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies. And a lot of the monies that are taken by EJN are returned or reinvested into the neuroscience community through FENS, activities at FENS. This is very important to recognize the difference between commercial journals and these society journals who invest directly in the community and are not for profit in the sense of trying to consider their profits first and the society second, with the society first from the EJN perspective. What EJN does is to run a number of training, as well as contributing about 600,000 to 800,000 euros to FENS each year. It runs many other activities, And on the next slide, I think some of those are summarized. So we just move on. On the next slide, one of the things that so these are some of the things that, for example, EJN does. It funds the running of the CAHAL Advanced Neuroscience Training courses, and there are several of those. There's some mentioned on this slide. The optogenetics is in next year. It's already applications, I think, maybe open it. That's being held in Bordeaux. But this year there were some other training opportunities in electrophysiology and behavioral analysis that were conducted online. So you should look out for these, and if you have any interest in additional training, that's something that you can do through this cahaltraining.org website. You can see mentioned there. And EJN sponsors that and also sponsors awards at FENS. The Best Publication Award, for example, the EJN Young Investigator Prize, FENS EJN Award are all initiatives that are conducted by EJN. So if you don't know much about FENS, I'm not sure how all of your background. So on the next slide, there's a sort of a summary of what FENS is up to. I mean, it's a large organization, and it's an umbrella organization for all of the societies, European societies of neuroscience. It obviously has its big forum, but it helps to support regional meetings as well. There are 44 European societies, 20,000 members from 33 countries. It's a huge enterprise. And EJN, as you can see on this illustration, is a real key part of this overall or overarching umbrella enterprise, right? So it also, of course, FENS advocates for neuroscience, and EJN contributes. The funding that EJN contributes is integral to that advocacy and outreach, as you'll see in subsequent slides. So if we go on to the next slide, Christina, the question that you maybe, I guess everyone should ask when considering where they're going to send their research is, why should I publish in a particular journal, right? You should always try to answer that question for yourself. The answer to the question with respect to EJN is very straightforward. It's an extremely fair and constructive peer review process. It's quite rapid into publication. The median time to first decision is about 40 days. But it's important that you should know it's transparent. You get, there's not a lot of behind the scenes conversations between reviewers and editors, which often takes place in other journals. Decisions are made and you're not quite sure sometimes why about your own papers. There's none of that at EJN. It's very transparent. Everything that everyone is saying about your paper, you will have access to. When your paper is accepted, it's rapidly published before the formatting is done through the copy editors. People can have access to it. There are no page charges, which is an extremely important thing these days when can be so expensive and prohibitive. That's a very important feature. And after acceptance, the article's published online very rapidly. There's a very diverse group of people who are evaluating your paper. One of the important things about EJN is it's not just a group of editors in New York or something like this. It's a very large group, diverse group from many countries, many European countries, many countries around the world. I'm coming to you from Sydney in Australia, for example, tonight, or your time in the morning. And so, we are, cover the world really. And so your papers are being read by people who have a diverse background. It's not just a single scientific group or vision. We have a very diverse one. So if we move to the next slide, a very important aspect also of the journal is not just it's that it's transparent, but that it's open access. So it's open science. People can access your papers directly. The data is shared if you have a sharing plan. We also have registered reports. Some more details about them shortly, but registered reports are where you register your design of your study previously to running the experiments. That's also evaluated. They're evaluated in anticipation of you running the experiments by a specific group of editors. We have preprint services, of course, and but there's a great deal of visibility. So EJN papers, as it's pointed out here, are viewed over 1.2 million times a year. I mean, they're very, very well viewed and cited, and so your paper will go out into the community, and it will get visibility when published in EJN. Just next slide, please, Christine. So, and one of the really interesting features, and something that I think can't be emphasized enough, is that's emphasized here by the editor-in-chief. This is the editor-in-chief of the journal, John Fox. So as he says here, and this is something he emphasizes continually to all of us, that we see our job as helping the community develop the very best possible paper they can to report the good, solid science they're doing. In other words, really, the point here is that the journal isn't interested just in high impact. It's interested in good science. And so if your paper is reporting good science, it'll be published. It doesn't have to be something that a group of editors think is going to be of interest and is going to get a lot of citations or a lot of eyes on it to help sell the journal. It's really about the science first, which is a very important feature about EJN. So I think if you send your paper to EJN, it's in very, very good hands. And you can see that it's very popular. If you just go on to the next slide, Christina, there's a lot of feedback. So if you just put all these up, these are examples of feedback that have actually been sent to the journal from people who have published there. You can see there's really very positive, as Randy McIntosh, we've had similarly good experiences with EJN. It's vital for scientists to get good work out there for consumption. There's thanks to the patients for the input and participation. Great editorial handling, says Tristan. It goes on. There's a lot of positive kudos to European Journal of Neuroscience for continually being leaders. There's very happy to publish our work. Review was professional, thoughtful, fair, quick, made public. These are important aspects of, that we take seriously, the feedback we get from people who publish with us. So positive and negative when that occurs, and it modifies our practices. But we get a lot of good feedback, so it's worth noting that. So if we go on to the next slide, there's more about the review process. There's one there, interesting one from Marta Botello about facing the challenges of registered reports. So they've gone through that process, and they enjoyed the insightful and constructive comments of the reviewers on that through that process. So, again and again, one can only recommend this journal because of the pertinence of the review process, on target, useful, and constructive. So, the real people who really publish in the journal have bothered to send us their comments. On registered reports, the next slide just discusses some issues. They're a relatively new thing, of course, in an attempt to encourage people to improve the replicability of studies and the transparency of methodology and so forth. They're quite challenging because you review the methodology first, run the study, and then it's published, whether it's whatever the results. And these are, and so it requires special handling. And we have very, it's been a long and challenging journey, but our new TMS EEG registered report investigating the effects of TMS current direction and pulse waveform on early TEPs is finally out. So there's one example of a registered report actually getting published, which sometimes they're not that easy to get published. Next slide, Christina. We have just a representation in this slide of who is on the editorial board at the journal. So you can't read all of this, but it just gives you an idea of the structure, right? So there's the editor-in-chief and the senior editors, who you can probably see those, Antoine and Paolo and Yolande. And then we have 32 section editors. Actually, there's more than that now because we've had some new additions, which I'll introduce to you shortly. There's three specific editors for the registered reports, and at present we have, and I think again we have more than this now, but there are 87 listed reviewing editors who are take control of papers of the review process. So there's a big team, and they're all volunteers, and they're all academic scientists. So, you're going to get a fair reading. It's not going to be just a bunch of professional editors, which is important, I think, in considering why you would send papers to EJN. The board is diverse. These are the senior editors. But if we move on, you can see the section editors, the new section editors that are coming. So in this year, I think there are something like 12 of them. Here are some. There's even a picture of Christina there.
Yes.
Yes, as a new section editor, which is great to see. And but you can see we have, there are people from China, Taiwan, US. On the next slide, you can see, from Chile, Ireland, Italy, the US again. But there are a lot of different editors. Tony Hannon, a colleague of mine here in Australia, and so on. So you have, all the time, the editorial team's being rejuvenated and diversified, and it's something that's taken very seriously. For example, on the next slide is an example of a recent paper which was published, an editorial that was published in the journal on strategies and a checklist for increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion in journals. And so it is something that, this is something the AJN takes very seriously, and something that I think the members of Mediterranean Neuroscience Society should be really pleased about and take advantage of this opportunity to publish here. Now, there's a very interesting, if on the next slide, there's an interesting Wiley, who is the publisher, who just does the physical publishing of the journal and coordinates that, the technical sides of that, not the academic side of it, has developed this very interesting these transformational agreements, which provide institutions throughout the world access to the journal directly. And you can see, in Europe, there are 21 agreements that cover 2,000 institutions. In Middle East and Africa, 3 agreements covering 85. Asia, there are 64. 55 institutions in Australia, and so on. And so there's a lot of agreements now that allow access to over 70,000 articles in the journal from these institutions. It's quite possible that where you are sitting now, that your institution is one that has an agreement. If you want to establish that, I think on the next slide, Christina, there's so you've got a little QR code there. If you want to quickly have a look, you can find out now, or you can go online if you don't have a means of accessing that, and try and establish whether you've got direct access to the journal through your institution, which means you don't even need to be a member of EJN or of FENS or subscribe to EJN. So you get a lot of there's a real attempt to help to get access to all of the relevant papers that in EJN. Okay, some summary here slides. The next slide summarizes the types of submissions that are being received, and it's a breakdown really by the countries that are submitting. You see a lot of them sort of follow the size of the country. As you can see, you get a lot of submissions from China, got a lot of submissions even from the US, but you can see probably in total, if you add the European countries, they're probably be the lion's share. But but the important thing, I suppose, is that it's a very diverse, again, evidence of a very diverse uptake of the journal across the world. So if people are willing to submit papers from these countries, they're willing to read these journals in this journal in those countries. So that's an important factor to recall in, when people trust their paper to a journal, it means they are following the content. So you can be sure of getting people from a wide range of countries. Now, if we go to the next slide, it sort of summarizes the types of submissions. So we have, as you can see, there's most of the papers, of course, are research reports. This is broken down by year. You can see there's been about 4,600 submissions. Most, as I say, research reports there, but quite a few and growing number of review articles. I'll have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. There's also special issue articles, and they're very interesting development as well. There's more and more special issues being proposed at the journal, and they're a good way to collect articles about specific hot topics together. If you have some ideas, we'll talk about that shortly. But anyway, that just gives you a breakdown of the kinds of articles, but you can also see they're also quite diverse, from short communication, spotlight type articles, and then registered reports in different stages. And there are even editorials, which you can see. I'll say a little bit more about those as well. Moving on to the next slide, this just summarizes how the article's handled when it comes into the journal. So essentially, it goes in to the editorial office for people. This is a sort of flowcharty thing where the there's a bit of quality control, make sure it's in the right sort of format. So if it's not, then often it'll get sent back. But it goes through to the section editors based on the content, who will then select reviewers, and then as those reviews come back in, they get evaluated by the section editors, who then send them up the stream to the senior editors, who make a decision based on the section editor's recommendation and their view of the manuscript. It may at that point be rejected, but quite often and more often than not, it goes through a revision process. There is an important line here which goes through the reject and resubmit button. So that's quite often used now to avoid rejecting papers where the science is good, but the presentation is not yet up to adequate standard. So it might be there's some statistical analyses that are needed, or some improvement in the presentation. So often those papers that would often have previously in the past or in other journals get rejected, often get sent back with a good feedback, actionable feedback, and allowing authors to resubmit after taking advantage of that feedback. And that's a really useful thing, because you often get papers that get rejected. You think, well, I could have addressed all those points. And this gives you the opportunity to do that and to send it back. So you don't just get rejected and without any other alternatives here, which I think is a good initiative. So now, okay, once you've decided to prepare a paper, there are different types of papers that you can prepare. And one of them that you should keep your eyes open for is special issues. So if you go to the next slide, Christina, it just describes starts to describe these special issues that have been generated, usually by some form of invitation that the editors think this would be a good topic, or maybe there's been an approach by a group or a meeting that's occurred and they want to publish some form of proceedings. These are really great possibilities, and really, if you had a thought about special issues, you should contact the editor-in-chief, John Fox, with your suggestion and a list of potential authors, and see how that discuss the possibilities. You can see some of the special issues in the next slide, I think, that have been published just recently. So, special issues on cannabinoid signaling, stress, cognitive rhythms, Alzheimer's, and even a special issue on celebrating Italian neuroscience. What could be better than that? So, there are a lot of varied sorts of topics, and so there's a great opportunity to think of possible topics there if you had a whole issue of papers in mind that you felt was worth covering. You can see some of them that are in progress right now on the next slide, I think. There's a list in the planning stages on psychedelics and intellectual development disabilities, pain, adolescent brain development, Drosophila, and so on. So a lot of these are continually moving through the system, and obviously, what usually happens here, they're not edited. In the first instance, there's invited editors who help to collect the papers and then go through the process of doing the first round of editing before they come into the journal, where they're then given a secondary evaluation. So if you were to propose a special issue, you may also propose to be a guest editor of that issue. So in the other types of papers that we're considering now for publication, so there are virtual issues that don't come out in print, but which you can see online, which cover various topics, like there's a summary of the World Congress, 11th World Congress of Neuroscience, FENS regional meeting, a collection of the top downloaded manuscripts, and network editorials from Kavli editors, and so on. So these are kinds of special issues that are virtual issues. We also now are publishing what are called profiles. There's been a number of profiles lately. If you go to the next slide, Christina, so for example, one series of profiles have been of women in science. These are often nominated profiles, and if you feel that there's a profile, you feel someone who deserves to be profiled, you can nominate people and to the editor-in-chief, and the senior editors make decisions about who will be covered in some of these situations. So there's the profiles in women in science. Next slide, I think. talks about the diversity series. So the Black in Neuro movement. There's there've been special sections of issues, published issues, profiling people in the Black and Neuro movement. For example, Angeline Dukes. And on the next slide, you can see there's also been one of the other groups that members often profiled from is the ALBA network, the Sunrise Network, which is a real attempt to embrace diversity in science. This is particularly in neuroscience, focused initially in Latin America, but embraces neuroscience quite broadly now. So these are really great opportunities for profiling researchers from these networks. And a new initiative just started is on the next slide, an initiative to profile what are called trailblazers in neuroscience. Again, these are just short format reviews, just describing research by individual researchers, often junior researchers who are developing their profile. There are some upcoming profiles mentioned there. There's some examples here. And again, these can be nominated by not by the individuals themselves, but perhaps by their advisors or by senior members in their area who would like to see these up and coming trailblazers in their area given some their work given publicity. So this is a new initiative just recently started, and that I think is going to help to, I think it gets increases the profile not just of individual researchers, but their areas of research. So I think they're very valuable. Obviously, just to finishing up here, we're obviously covered in social media pretty heftily. On the next slide, just summarizes that. There's 20,000 followers on Twitter or X, 5,200 Facebook followers, and so on. So there's a lot of news that comes out from the journal is propagated through social media, and that's another way in which information is moved through the system. But EJN has a strong presence in neuroscience generally at meetings across the world. In the next slide, which I think is the final slide, it just summarizes the meetings that EJN members have attended and had intended to have sort of workshops on the journal. This has happened last year and will happen in the next and meetings throughout the next year and will go on into the future. Obviously, EJN is, we're all attending meetings as scientists, the editors at the journal, but it's always a good thing to have an opportunity to get feedback from people who are using the journal, who have particular, issues they want to see addressed or particular ideas they want to discuss. And this is and this is why I'm doing this workshop. This is why these workshops occur at various meetings, is to get more feedback from you who use the journal or who want to use the journal, and want to have a conversation about issues you see and in making that the best possible experience. So I encourage you, if you have questions now, to please ask me. I'll do my best to answer them. I'm not a I'm a section editor. I don't have all of the answers at my fingertips. I'll try. But you can. Everyone's very approachable at the journal, and writing to the editor-in-chief is not. He's very active, and he'll be immediately back to you if you have any questions that you need to ask. But by all means, raise any issues that my presentation has brought up, now. And thank you very much for attending and for your interest in EJN and in publishing in EJN. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was very interesting. Okay. I don't know, is there any questions from the audience? You can also write it if you want in the chat, or you can
Yes,
open
there's the chat. I can see the chat at least. And
yes, no, someone wrote before about the audio, but the audio was fine. Had a problem.
yes. Now, if you want me to go over anything else again, yes, Hanani.
Yes, please.
I have a question about the nature of the training that you mentioned earlier in your presentation. I mean,
Yes.
is it will be remotely or in place?
So there are two sites, one in Portugal and one I think in Patibud in Porto, I think, but definitely in Bordeaux. But there's also online courses. The best way is this. Let me just. There's a. Actually, it's not much point since I can't share it with you.
Can I say?
But there's a
Yes,
website there. I can take you back. If you go back to slide 3.
at FENS website. I can do it if you want.
Yes, you can just see it's on the. It's www.cahal-training.org. That's I think that's what you were referring to. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the I think I can describe to you what's there. Anyway, there's a website there which has information about courses that are going on. There are
So,
about look there are probably
is this one right?
3 a year or so, 3 or 4 a year, and they go for 3 weeks or so. They can be pretty detailed courses. Anyway, it's hands-on neuroscience training courses, so they'd be very valuable if you you really want to get involved in.
This one.
So there's this optogenetics, chemogenetics, and biosensors course at Bordeaux in April, for example.
So they are
And
in person. Yes, they're all in person.
yes, there's another one in Bordeaux on single cell profiling analysis, and there will be an online course. It looks, oh no, that's already been, I beg your pardon, that was just
Yes.
finished.
Okay.
But there'll be other courses during the year. Anyway, if you go to that website, you can keep up with what is being offered there. And
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
okay.
Thank you very much.
As here the 2024. Yes, it's but it seems that these are all in person in Portugal and France.
Yes, good. Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so everything's moved back into in person, which is good. Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I was also last week. I was at a FENS school, winter school, in Austria, and they were participants from all over the world. It was not only Europe. We had one from Japan, one from Brazil. So you can apply if you want. Anyone else? Any questions? And also regarding FENS, those that they are in Europe, if they are members of their national societies, for example, a member of the Hellenic Society of Neuroscience, so I'm also a member of FENS. But we are going to make an effort to do that also for the Mediterranean Neuroscience Society. So hopefully next year it will be possible as a member of the MNS to also be a member of FENS. So then maybe you will have more benefits regarding schools and things like that, or a discount at the conference. But in any case, you can apply even if you're not a FENS member. You don't have to be a member. Yes, please. Nesreen has a question. Do you want to write it? Do you accept manuscripts on modeling in neuroscience? For example, epileptic seizure. Bernard, can you see the?
Oh yes, on modeling. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, there are many articles that are heavy modeling papers. Where the data comes from is often, the modeling data that have been collected separately, and the models have been developed on that data, and the paper is concerned with that paper. That's very relevant. I mean, the expression of various computational models can be very useful to synthesize and organize findings across papers. So that, yes, we definitely consider modeling papers as data, as full publication. So you should certainly consider, if you have developing models of seizures, that would be very relevant. I've handled papers like that myself already.
Nice, thank you. Other questions? What about articles, clinical research on neurophysiology? For example, studies with axonal excitability studies.
Yes,
Yes.
I think you can be very safely assured. It's interesting to consider. So there are different sections, right? So I'm in behavioral neuroscience, but there are other sections in clinical and in cognitive neuroscience, and that cover sort of neurophysiology in humans and in patient groups, and they would be specialized section editors in those areas who would handle those papers. So that's another very important factor here, which is when you look at the breakdown of the editorial team, if you go to the EJN website, you can see the list of the team. When you look at the section editors, you'll be able to see people who are relevant to your area, who they are, and so you'll know who's going to basically see your paper in advance. It may help you to, but so it's an extremely broad journal in that sense. Once you see the breadth of the editorial team, you realize that it's covering every aspect of neuroscience. And some areas of the journal will cover even educational and historical issues. But, for the basic research articles, it's going to be the standard research that's going to be the most common paper. And you'll be able to see who the editor is who's handling that by looking at the actual names of the people and their specializations on the website.
Nice, thank you. Yes, it's very broad from what I know as well. Any other questions? Okay, if there is no other questions, I would like to thank you very much. That was very
It's a great
informative.
pleasure. I'm glad we got a chance to do this, Christina. I'm glad you got a video. You can,
Yes,
if
me
people want
too.
to see again or they want to show it to colleagues, they should definitely request you.
Yes, we'll
Request
do
the video.
that. There is another. Is the implementation sufficient to validate a biophysical model, by physical model built from a cohort study?
Implementation sufficient to validate. Oh, I see. Um, yes, I mean, it can be. Yeah. It depends on how well implemented. But as usual, these are evaluated fairly tightly, but against the usual criteria. But that shouldn't dissuade you from submitting the paper. As I hope I made clear, the first step in when we receive papers is usually to try and we decide amongst ourselves how to get it reviewed most effectively. And so we're not looking, if the science is satisfactory, I mean, obviously we get papers where it's too premature. We get so many submissions, some are bound to be a little underdone. But for 95%, 98% of papers are ready to be reviewed. It's just a matter of working out how to achieve that and getting the best possible review. So and get good feedback for you as the authors. So yes, there's nothing off the table. If you can demonstrate implementation at in a cohort study, then that's a very adequate paper. That's a great paper.
Okay, great. Yes, so
Any
we'll
more?
post it also on the
Uh,
Mediterranean Neuroscience Society website. So if someone wants to see it again, it will be possible. Probably we'll do
that's
that
okay.
next
That's
week,
yeah.
not immediately.
Mm.
But I think, yes, it was great and it's very good that we did it. And I hope we'll have more opportunities in the future to interact with EJN and FENS and SFN and all other relevant societies and organizations. So thank you, Bernard, very much
No, it's a great
for
pleasure.
staying so
Anyway,
late in
send
Australia.
your papers to us. We will
Yes,
publish them.
yes,
Let's make
please.
it good science. Anyway, great to talk to
Okay,
you all.
bye. Thank you.
Thanks. See
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Thanks, Christina. Bye-bye.